Hello, welcome back to Good Nightmare. Thank you for sticking around with this new, more sporadic upload schedule, or rather, no upload schedule. I've had this topic on my mind for maybe the past month, and I felt like I finally wanted to share it with you. I would not be surprised if some of you have heard of this particular topic, but I hadn't until earlier this year, and I was really intrigued by it. We've all heard of people who were once considered strange or unusual throughout history, from wolfmen to bearded women to contortionists, all of which are able to be explained in later centuries by genetic disorders, hormone imbalances, birth defects, or just an unusual level of flexibility. Of course, none of these things should have depleted their worth as people, but those years were rife with cruel treatment and misunderstanding. The person in this particular case, I don't believe has ever had their condition explained, and nor have I personally been able to find confirmed cases of it since. Please excuse my terrible Australian accent when I try to pronounce this name. I'm going to try not to butcher it, but thanks for your understanding. I think most people with an Australian accent don't usually have a very good accent in other languages. Tarrare was a Frenchman born in 1772 to his parents, who would find themselves in an unusual predicament as their child grew. By the time Tarrare reached his teen years, his appetite had become insatiable. It was said that he was able to eat his own weight in food in one day. A lot of us have heard our parents say at some stage, especially as teens when we're growing, that we're eating them out of house and home. But in this case, Tarrare was literally eating his parents out of house and home. In fact, it came to a point where they could no longer afford to feed him as much as he required, and so he was forced to leave home. Tarrare found himself travelling through the country with others on the outskirts of society. They would beg for food and steal food to survive. Tarrare then found value in performance. He worked with a travelling man who would put on unusual shows for the masses to make his living. Tarrare would show his skills of being able to consume unusual and massive amounts of food and materials, including live animals, stones, and an entire basket of apples in one show. When this proved unsustainable, Tarrare moved on to join the French military for a time. However, the rations they were made to live on were not sufficient for him, and he would therefore ask others for theirs when his were depleted. His rations were increased fourfold after he was admitted to the hospital with exhaustion, but this was still not enough for him, and he would have to scavenge for food among rubbish and waste. Upon observing this unusual talent or affliction, the military decided that he must stay at the hospital so that they could run experiments, test the limits of his abilities, and possibly find answers. This is where he was allegedly fed a live cat. And without being too graphic, as I know that a lot of us are pet lovers here, he consumed it similar to the way a snake would, regurgitating the fur and bones. Tarrare's talents were put to use when it was discovered that he could swallow objects other than food, such as boxes and packages containing messages, and could pass them without damage. He was then used as a spy and a courier. Before the military could trust him, however, he was given what he was told was an important message, but was actually a dummy message, to carry to a prisoner in his body behind enemy lines. Thankfully for the messenger, it was a dummy note to see if he could be trusted in the first place. Tarrare was caught when his disguise as a German peasant was uncovered due to his inability to actually speak German. He gave into the interrogation by his captors, and when he admitted that he had swallowed a box containing a message for the prisoner, he was allegedly strapped to a toilet for 30 hours until he passed the package. When it was found that the message was not in fact important intelligence but a decoy or dummy message, Tarrare was sent to the gallows to be hanged. At the last moment, though, he was taken down from the gallows and beaten instead. The other alternative ending to this story was that rather than passing and leaving the package, it was said that Tarrare actually passed it and then reconsumed it so that no one would know there was a package at all. Tarrare returned to the hospital after his military stint as a spy, and doctors attempted to find a cure for him but were unsuccessful. He wasn't able to be kept on a controlled diet. In fact, in doing so, as legend has it, it caused him to fight stray dogs for their food, drink the blood of patients undergoing bloodletting treatment, and he would try to eat bodies from the mortuary. The next 20 seconds involves a theory about a missing child involving Tarrare, so feel free to skip forward if you need to. It won't be anything graphic. When a 14-month-old child went missing from the hospital, Tarrare was the first suspect, and so he was expelled. Tarrare's life ended in 1798 when he contracted tuberculosis. Tarrare, however, alleged that he also had complications from what he believed was a golden fork he'd swallowed that had become lodged in his gut. Upon his death, his body began to decompose quite rapidly. And when opening Tarrare's mouth during his autopsy, doctors found that they could see through his jaws, down a massive canal and directly into his stomach. No fork was found. Tarrare was approximated to be 26 years old at the time of his death. Prader-Willi syndrome is probably the closest it comes to explaining Tarrare's strange talents. Prader-Willi leaves people with a sense of hunger that cannot be satisfied. They are unable to feel full and do not know when to stop eating, not intuitively. However, this often has many related complications, one of which is difficulty in controlling or maintaining a steady weight. This wasn't the case for Tarrare, though, as no matter how much he consumed and no matter what he consumed, he didn't seem to put on any weight. At 17, it was recorded that he was only 45 kilos. When he would eat, his stomach would stretch so severely that the skin itself became loose. And when his stomach was empty, he was able to wrap the loose skin around his waist like a belt. The skin of his face would also become sallow and loose when empty after having been so stretched. His mouth was as large as his appetite, being able to hold 12 eggs at once. Those who had contact with him would say that his skin was always hot, sweating, and that he smelled terrible, which I suppose would indicate an incredibly fast metabolism. This seems more likely to explain why his hunger couldn't be satiated. Everything moved through him at a rate of knots. It was also considered that perhaps he suffered from issues affecting his thyroid or amygdala. However, there have been no modern cases recorded that come anywhere close to matching how Tarrare's disorder presented. I find it highly unlikely that we'll see another case like this in our lifetime at least, or that we may ever find an explanation. When I first came across this case, my first thought was perhaps it was Prader-Willi syndrome. or something similar, but it just doesn't seem to fit. If you have any theories or have heard some unusual theories about this, I would love for you to share them with the group. We have a Facebook group, Twitter, and Instagram that are all going to be linked in the show notes, so feel free to follow or join. If you have any cases that you would like me to cover or that you are interested in and just want to chat about with other people in the Facebook group or myself, feel free to get in touch. Everyone is so friendly and supportive in the Facebook group especially, and there are always some great discussions going on in there. Hopefully it won't be too long until I can bring you another episode. I'm thinking of doing another fairy tale next. I'm going to have a look at some that I personally haven't read or heard of before. As always, thank you so much for listening and sticking with me. After I took my break and basically axed the upload schedule, we somehow ticked over to 1.2k subscribers on Podcast Addict. And it's just incredible to me that everyone is still interested and still listening. And I do this for enjoyment, really. So for other people to get enjoyment out of it as well is so meaningful and so special to me. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it and appreciate the connections that I've made along the way. Anyway, that's enough being sappy. I'm going to go and play with my kittens and read. And until next time, sweet dreams.